Test
What
one,
was
test two.
that? What
Pardon?
was that craziness? What was that craziness that happened?
My computer forced an update. Like it just
Stupid
started
computer.
updating, and I didn't tell it to. I didn't tell it to reschedule
Yeah.
it, but it just happened.
It gets real ornery. Windows gets real ornery if you put those off too long.
Yeah. Oh well. We are within 15 to 20 of being done with this episode, and we're right on schedule. So this will be easy.
Great.
All right. So ready when you guys are?
Yep, I'm good.
So on that note, being faithful to original source material and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of stepping away from comic book cinema, or at least American comic book cinema, into more socially philosophical waters. This week, we saw the release of Netflix's adaptation of Death Note, the critically acclaimed anime and manga series, and a lot of fans and critics immediately condemned the film for lacking the spirit of the original property and changing motivations and defining aspects of beloved figures within the source material. This whole release strikes at a deeper issue that constantly comes up in discussions of cinematic representations of classic works, whether they be centuries or decades old. So the question I asked you guys today, and the question that I want our audience to think about, is how much responsibility does a new incarnation of something hold to its source, and how much can or should something change when reimagined by a new creative team? I see Manning has a very thoughtful look on his face, so I'm going to go to Manning first. Mr. Franks.
Oh, this is a doozy. This is definitely a think piece in and of itself. There is no right answer in the sense of how much you should change a source material when being adapted to either the big screen or the small screen. In the case of Death Note, I haven't seen the original. I haven't seen the new one. It's on my list right after I get through One Punch Man, which I haven't started yet. But the controversy surrounding that seemed legitimate. As much as there were defenders, there were detractors of the initial whitewashing casting. But the director, of course, defended it, saying this was a different interpretation. And a lot of the actors as well made that claim. But if you look at how characters have been adapted from the small screen or even the big screen, liberties have to be taken. You can't have a complete 100% adaptation. I mean, if you're look at one of the most famous adaptations, or most popular, I should say. Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. Wolverine is not a 6-foot-tall Aussie. He is a short Canadian guy. And do people care? Maybe at first, but he became such a beloved character over time that people just didn't seem to care. And it's really hard to say to someone, oh, well, it's not perfect, so you can't like that thing because it's not true to the source material whatsoever. You know what? Some people have had no previous prior knowledge when they watch the X-Men films, and they're like, "That's Wolverine. That's awesome." It all comes down to the point of what you have been exposed to, and liberties will be taken to characters. There won't be 100% adaptation. You won't like it. Now, if we're getting on the idea of diversity casting in and of itself, and when you have cases of whitewashing such as Death Note, we're opening a can of worms in and of itself that can be touched on at a later date. But the idea of characters being changed for another medium, it hurts. I don't like sometimes when, you make changes to characters. Let's go back to Maleficent. I didn't care for that adaptation or what they did with her. But you know what? There are some people that did. It has a relatively okay score on Rotten Tomatoes, so some people like that. So it all depends on the person and your background, and that in and of itself, I think, creates a certain amount of dialogue to see exactly where we can make those changes, where there will be pushback, and where they're overstretching our bounds, and when does it become the character? When does the character not become the character? I think that brings open the open dialogue that we can start having for situations like that.
What about you, Chris Clow? I know adaptations to other mediums are a big deal with everything that you write about. So tell me about what your thoughts on this.
Well, actually, before I answer, I have a question for you, Johnny, because I know that you have been on a tear to absorb basically the entirety of American cinematic history as quickly as possible. Have you seen Psycho yet? the original?
I have.
Have you seen Gus Van Sant's remake?
I have.
Okay. All right. So, see, that's kind of an interesting example of adaptation because that's same medium to same medium, but Van Sant's intent was to shoot it virtually identically,
Shot for shot. And it came across to me as someone who usually advocates for, maintaining the spirit and the content of the original. It just seemed hollow to me. It really did.
But yeah, and I totally agree with you. But even that shot for shot remake was not without its deviations, was it?
There was one really weird scene. Yeah,
in the shout when he's being a voyeur. So
Oh
for those of you who may not have seen both versions of Psycho, or if you've just seen the original, then good on you. But director Gus Van Sant remade the movie in 1998. I think it was 98, or was it 99? No, it was 98. And so there's a scene in the original where Norman Bates is watching originally Vivian Lee's character, I think it was Vivian Lee, in the shower through a peephole at the Bates Motel. And for the remake, the female character who is now played by Anne Heche and Norman Bates, who is now played by Vince Vaughn, was changed a little bit to add a creepy lubricated sound effect while Vince Vaughn is watching Anne Heche in the shower. Kind of changes the intent of the scene to a degree, I think. Anyway, if I have a point in bringing that gross image up, then I think there is virtually never going to be a direct adaptation. Never. Even the most specific adaptations will not be one-to-one. And at some point, when you see an adaptation of another story in another medium in particular, you kind of have to go, okay, so if this is aiming to be one-to-one, then what's the point of telling the story in a new medium outside of, movies will make more money probably than a book or a TV show or a comic book or whatever it is. But by that same token, if you deviate too much from the source, then what's the point of retaining the title? Or what's the point of calling the characters by the same names that they had in the original work? There's a very fine balance to draw. I mean, the one that, at least in the comic book world, that always comes up, at least for me, is Watchmen. Because Zack Snyder used original panels from the Watchmen comic book story that was drawn by Dave Gibbons as storyboards for what the movie was going to accomplish. And the ultimate edition of that movie is just about as close as of a one-to-one adaptation from comic to cinema that I've ever seen. Of course, there are some notable differences and some notable deviations, but by and large, when you look at comic book cinema overall, Watchmen is about as close as you can get, barring, well, I guess Sin City is a little bit closer technically, but I mean, Watchmen is such a well-regarded and beloved story that it's pretty close. It's almost identical, except for a couple of instances. But when it comes to larger questions of what to adapt and what not to adapt, you have to strike a balance. You can't just throw the original story out completely, because if you do that, then what's the point of calling it Death Note? Or what's the point of calling it Watchmen? Or what's the point of calling it Batman? It's just like, that's a problem that I had with Batman Returns in particular. Because to me, that was basically just a Tim Burton movie that had the names of Batman characters. Like, it was very, very not identifiable to the characters that I know as being in the world of Batman. But either way, there needs to be some fidelity. But the level of fidelity is based on the kind of story being told, because at the end of the day, if you're adapting a specific story, conceivably the ends need to match up with the original work to some degree. How you get there isn't very important, but you do need to get there. And that's where fidelity comes into play, at least I think.
Which are all really good points, I think, and it calls to mind. There's an old allegory that's brought up in conversation about. It's the allegory of a ship, where it asks if you have a ship in a harbor and you replace the mast, and then you replace the sails, and then you replace all of the wood that makes up the frame of the boat, and then you replace everything that's in the boat over time. At the end of renovation after renovation after renovation, when at the end of it there's none of the original left, is it still the same ship? If you take out all of the things that make up something what it is, can you still call it the same thing? And I think when it comes to adaptations, it's a really fine line that we walk, like you guys said. So, it's definitely a discussion that warrants a show on its own. But we have our favorite part of the show coming up. Manning has never done this before. I'm excited to hear Manning try his hand at Turbo News. Guys, are you ready?
Sure. Let's do it. Why not?
As our much beloved host always says, we know that Chris Clow and in this case Manning Franks are two very smart people. But what if I only gave them 20 seconds to answer a question?
Ooh, you're skimping us a little bit on the time.
Right. We usually do 30, don't we? Let's do 30. I like these topics today. Let's do 30. Let's do the full 30.
Short change. My first day job.
I'm getting my stopwatch ready so that I can make sure that we don't go overtime. Unless you guys say something really entertaining, in which case, First of all, though, in some serious news, this past week saw the tragic passing of Tobe Hooper, the visionary director behind Poltergeist and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Chris Clow, thoughts on this?
Nothing good. Tobe Hooper, who directed Poltergeist, that's a movie that I know him for. That movie kept me up at night for a long time as a kid, and sometimes today I still think of things in Poltergeist and wake up. It was just a terrifying movie, especially to see as a kid from beginning to end. But he's also the director of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its sequel. He did Night Terrors. He did the Toolbox Murders. He did some notable work on TV. It's a loss. It's tragic. But he definitely has quite a legacy for us to look back on and appreciate everything that he did.
40 seconds, I felt like that warranted an extra 10 seconds. So starting off things going a little long. Manning Franks, are you ready for your first Turbo News?
Let's see if I can get another 30 seconds.
Channing Tatum, following the success of Logan and Deadpool, has stated publicly that his long-awaited Gambit movie is set to resume production. Manning, go.
I'm going to be totally honest, I forgot about this movie even existing. I think a lot of people forgot about it. I think Channing Tatum forgot this movie existed for a while. Because with everyone that left this movie, the directors, I think it might have been fine if it was just buried, but it's going to be here, so I'm totally on board. If they're going with the direction of Logan and Deadpool, making it more of a independent of the main series, that's going to be great. We're going to have a nice, fun Cajun time with Channing Tatum as Gambit, so I'm okay with that. Let's see what he can offer. About time.
27 seconds, not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Close to the amount. You're right up. You've edited us so many times that you you know exactly how long.
30 seconds. Exactly? Yeah, totally.
Chris Clow.
Yes, sir.
You ready to do this next one?
I think so.
Film studios are reportedly in talks to begin a premiere service that will allow you to rent in-theater movies for as low as $30 as soon as the end of this year. Thoughts on this, Chris?
That's a shitty idea. It's not. It's going to be more expensive right out of the gate than going to the theater, especially if you have something like a Movie Pass, right? The idea of seeing those movies in your home a little earlier is on its face kind of enticing, but I'm also a believer of the uniqueness of the theatrical experience, so this doesn't really strike me very well.
And you even got to get our future sponsor plug in there too. That was very impressive.
Continues to impress.
All right, Manning.
All right.
Due to set photos hitting the internet, fan sites are abuzz with the possibility of Juggernaut, everyone's favorite character from X-Men: The Last Stand, possibly showing up in Deadpool 2. What do you think about this, Manning?
Okay. I looked at these photos, and let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're not sure that Kane Marco is actually going to be in this adaptation of Deadpool. He could be, but these are the set photos of him, this guy wearing a motion capture suit. For all we know, it could be any hulking frame character, because the Juggernaut is, of course, a Juggernaut. So you know what? It could be any big buff-powered hero in the X-Men universe. So yeah, sure, let's see it. But at this time, there's not enough. So close.
Good points. Good.
Not bad. You were winding down. I think that was.
I was winding down.
You could hear the tone go back down again, so we were good there.
Okay.
Michael Kenneth Williams, known for his parts in 12 Years a Slave and Boardwalk Empire, has been cut from the upcoming Han Solo spin-off film Manning, go.
First when I saw this, I was like, what? More? Where's the fire alarm? Let's pull it. This Han Solo movie's going down with a ship. But then I saw the reason why it was cut, and then I started to just kind of relax because, schedule. That's totally understandable because they had to do extensive reshoots because they lost their directors, which totally makes sense in a case such as this. Out of the ordinary, absolutely sure. But because it was a mutual exclusive thing, but then again, it makes me wonder, how much was he actually in it? Because if they can easily cut him out, they had enough rewrites in there in order to just scurry him along. So we'll see.
Right on 30 seconds.
Cool. I had like
Chris
2
Cloud.
words.
Yes, sir.
Are you ready for the last news bit of Turbo News?
I think so.
This one's an interesting one. John Cena and Kevin Hart, two massive stars in pop culture, are uniting for a Knight Rider movie. Chris Cloud, go.
All right. I mean, there's nothing that screams. I'm not like a Knight Rider fanboy, so there's nothing that screams inauthentic to me about this, I suppose. I like John Cena. I haven't absorbed a lot of Kenneth Hart, but I've liked what I've seen. So, all right, sure. Let's see what they can do in Kit. Let's see what happens.
Let it be known that we just referenced Kenneth Hart today on Geek Pulse
crap.
Radio.
I just don't want
Kevin Hart.
I just don't want to ride along free with talking car. That's all I'm hoping it's not going to be because no
that's
one
all
wants
I can
that.
think of is that we're getting another ride along movie.
Kevin Hart with on a car.
I said Kenneth Hart. I was thinking of Michael Kenneth Williams and Kevin Hart, and they just kind of coagulated together.
He bleeds. There's 2 mistakes in one podcast. He bleeds.
Manning is throwing everyone off their game this show. This is great. We're all just nervous because you're used to editing us so much. You know the show better than we do.
Well, I try.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 14.1 of Geek Pulse Radio. We are going to get started on episode 14.2 now with the Q&A portion with Mr. Manning Franks. But before we go, gentlemen, shout-outs. Chris Clow.
Shout out to the High Cliff State Park in Sherwood, Wisconsin, where I camped this weekend with my wife. It was a lot of fun, but apparently it's also haunted. So thank you to the ghosts of High Cliff State Park for not haunting my wife and I.
That is a very, very good thing that you were not haunted.
Very good.
Mr. Manning, how about you?
I just want to first say that our thoughts and prayers go out to those affected in Houston right now, specifically with the flooding that is going on out there. Someone who lived in that area for a while, this situation kind of hits close to home. So I'm just hoping everyone there is safe and that our thoughts and prayers at the Geeks and Gamers community are with you.
Yes, and if you are a member of the group, then please let us, and you live in the affected areas, please let us know that you're safe, because we do absolutely care, and we want to know that everybody is as safe as they can be under the circumstances. So please stay safe out there.
And my shout out, of course, is to our very ill regular host, Chris Kubiak. Please come back soon. This was much more work than I expected it to be.
I can't fill these shoes.
I don't know. Does Chris have big feet? We need to find out. Anyway,
let's measure it. He always talks about feet. He does talk about feet a lot.
I feel like there's a joke in there that he would make somewhere about the
I've
size
been
of
trying to grab at the awkward jokes the whole way through, but I just can't do it.
I'll insert it in post. I'll insert a joke in post.
Sounds good. Ladies and gentlemen, keep it nerdy. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Wait, they can't see me. Wait.
All right, I need to throw my clothes in the dryer, and then I'll be back. We'll do 14.2.
All right, I'm
awesome.
Stopped, and I'm exporting part 2.
Oh, good idea. Da-da-da-da-da-da.
And you have 52 minutes of audio to play with, Manning.
Yeah, oh, that's a good night. Good. I'm glad it's late.
Yeah. Welcome to the late night recording sessions.
The Late Show with Geek Pulse Radio.
Yeah, pretty much.
News part 2. Okay, yeah, because usually I'm in bed. Because
because you're normal. That's good.
I'm in college now. It's hard to go to bed at a decent hour. You're usually doing work because I'm just doing work prior to you guys recording. So I was like, might as well get stuff done.
Where do you go to school?
They have like a little thing show. I guess I don't. Oh, I go to I get High Point University in in the Triad area of North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Does that sound? You know where Charlotte is and and you know where High Point or Greensboro or Winston-Salem are?
I know where Winston-Salem is.
Okay, that Greensboro where I live is like the neighbor to Winston-Salem.
Okay.
And then the neighbor to Greensboro is High Point, where I currently go to school. It's like we call it the Triad, the Piedmont Triad, because they're like it's like a triangle almost. They're connected. Illuminati confirmed. So
excellent. Yeah. All right, I'm just exporting. Oh, I think it's done.
Is it done? Yay!
Let me check.
My clothes were doing that thing where it limps along at the very, very end of the wash cycle, so I'm just like waiting for the beep.
All right, I'm ready. Should I start her up?
No, I need to throw my clothes into the dryer, so I'm not.
Oh, you still wait? Oh, I'm so okay. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
sorry. I was under the impression that it was.
Nope, it was. It's doing that thing where it's just winding down, and I'm just like, come on, just finish.
Come on.
Can you just
come on?
Just open it and be like, you're done, or
I want
your time is up.
I'm close to that point.
Hey, this is interesting. I was looking because I pre-ordered an Xbox One X that's coming out in November, and for some reason, it says that I've paid more on it than I have.
Okay. I mean,
is this a limited edition?
Yeah, this Project Scorpio edition. That was the only one that they had on pre-order. I didn't really care.
Fancy.
I just wanted to get one, but kind of.
Is it?
Strange.
Oh wait, Fantastic Four reboot. I gotta think out the character people.
Oh yeah.
Oh, crap baskets.
That's the only one that really. The other one that might take some thought is we got asked which 2 geek-related characters you think would make the best face-off.
Like face off, like the
fight. McGregor versus Mayweather in honor of that.
Oh, I was thinking, like who would be John Travolta? Who would be Stage? Jeez, are we pitching or are we just like casting? Oh, favorite fantasy cast. Okay, never mind. I answered my next question.
Just think of a few people who might be good in those roles. We'll bullshit our way through it. Remember, Manning, you're me this show, so your job is to be unprepared and just kind of make things up as you go.
Oh, really? Huh? I did not notice you made things up as you go. The mystique has been broken. Oh, come on. I'm losing everything. My desk is way too cluttered. Go away, Baby Groot.
I am Groot.
I would respond, but I don't remember what Rocket says to Groot because he says a lot of things. So I'll just respond with, "We are Groot."
Very good. And true.
Fantastic.
In the most recent issue of Secret Empire, Groot was talking and Rocket just said, "Now don't get too technical, all right? You're going to lose the stupid humans."
I love those two. How is Secret Empire going? I dropped off because I couldn't afford to keep.
It's almost over. It's gotten better, and I think it's going to stick the landing, thankfully. But on concept, I certainly was not sold on it. I mean, back when that first Captain America issue came out with Nick Spencer writing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Cap is my favorite Marvel character, so that was.
It hurt.
Yeah, exactly. But
I feel ya.
Fuck it. I'll do my laundry till later. I don't really care.
You sure?
Wait, I got. Wait. Okay. Let me just yabba dabba deeba da do. I'm trying to think of like people, actors. Give me like 1 minute. Do you guys have something, or you gonna make it up on the spot?
I was just kind of gonna go on the spot.
Okay, I guess you know what. Go ahead and go, and if I think of someone, I'll think. Well, actually, that's. You know what? I can throw Doom. I can throw Doom in there, right?
You are a wonderful editor, and we are going into this now, and you are now editing your own voice, which is gotta be a fun, surreal experience. So here we go.
It's really trippy.
Welcome back to episode 14.2 of Geek Pulse Radio. It is really weird to be doing 2 of these in a row. Chris Kubiak, I miss you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to our show every week. I'm so excited to have 2 amazing hosts with me today. As always, on my far left on the virtual studio of Google Hangouts, I have Mr. Chris Clow. Chris, how are you feeling tonight?
Doing all right, man. Ready to jump in.
And Mr. Manning Franks, who joined us on episode 14.1, where we talked about a lot of things, actually. And today we will be talking about some more crazy stuff. Manning, how's it feel to be on this side of the microphone?
I swear, we just talked. I might have done a jump in time. I can't really tell because this is what day is it? I don't know. I can't tell. But I'm just gonna roll with it.
It is very, very nice to have the person who always has to critique what we do. I'm very curious to hear you critique yourself now as you're moving into the editing bay. You'll have to give us your thoughts on the new experience that comes with editing your own voice.
I will let you know first off. If I need a little side tangent thing, I will. But it's so far I can tell you, as someone who's done it before, it's really weird. It's really weird.
Eventually you get used to the sound of your own voice.
One day, but not today.
All right. Well, we might as well get into it then. We have a lot of awesome questions from the community and Geeks and Gamers. Go join the Geeks and Gamers discussion group on Facebook or tweet your questions at us at Geek Pulse Radio on Twitter. We will do our best to answer them on an upcoming episode of Geek Pulse Radio. Our first question is from Mr. Roy Morgan. He asks, what is your fantasy cast for the inevitable Fantastic Four reboot? Mr. Chris Clow, what do you think?
It's a little bit tough to say. If I'm trying to think of what I would like to see in a Fantastic Four movie, then, well, I mean, I'd like it to be in the MCU, but let's presume for a second that that's a non-starter. I would like to see, I think I'd like to see them a little older because I'd like to see Reed and Sue's kids. It seems like the ages might have been a little bit of an impediment in the last couple of tries that they've done to the Fantastic Four. We probably would have gotten to Franklin and Valeria if Tim Story had made a third one, but that clearly didn't happen. So if I'm thinking a little bit older, I think John Hamm could be a kick-ass Mr. Fantastic.
Oh, that's good. Good.
He has the ability to convey intelligence, and if he's fed the right lines that help to show off Reed Richards' brilliance, and I think he could totally do it. As far as a comparable Sue Storm to a John Hamm Mr. Fantastic, Charlize Theron, I think she could be. She could stand in equal measure with him, and you could see that they are a couple that love each other and that they're both brilliant and awesome superheroes and philanthropists and everything that they're supposed to be. Johnny Storm is a little bit harder to cast, but if we're going where maybe Sue and Johnny aren't that far apart in age, then give Charlie Hunnam a good part. Let him be Johnny Storm. Let him be the Human Torch. I think that Charlie Hunnam is a good actor. And if he's given the opportunity to display some of the exuberance that he had in, what was that show that was on a college campus that he was in? Undeclared. Undeclared.
Oh,
If he could sort of lean into undeclared a little bit, but still be a badass when given the opportunity, then I think that could be pretty good. As far as Ben Grimm, that's harder. Obviously, he's probably going to be someone that's either CG or under a lot of prosthetics. And I actually don't have a recast for that because I loved Michael Chiklis as the Thing. So I would like to see him given another chance to do it. So I guess that's my Fantastic Four.
What about
Nice.
you, Manning?
This was definitely a lot harder than I would anticipate it being because usually I like to just mull over the fan casting for a while, but this one I was thrusted into the position where I had to think of something fast. But one person that I've really always enjoyed, I love the John Hamm choice, but I think I'm probably going to lean on start with Invisible Woman. Invisible Woman, Sue Storm, Rosamund Pike. I feel like would be an excellent choice because if we want to go more older look, she has that presence. If you look at Gone Girl, where she kind of just captured the screen, and if you want to look also her more calm demeanor and sensibility. I'm sorry, and that's Pride and Prejudice. Excuse me, I'm so sorry, my Jane Austen fans. I'm so sorry. It's Pride and Prejudice that she was in, where she was fantastic as well in that. Also, I would love for Ben Grimm, Michael Cutlass, who is in Walking Dead. The man feels like he could just be this giant force because every time that he walked upon screen, he just kind of like, even though he sometimes came off as cartoonish sometimes, I feel like that would translate perfectly for Ben Grimm. For Johnny Storm, I'm not set on Johnny Storm because I've liked Chris Evans and I've liked Michael B. Jordan as Human Torch both times, and I've enjoyed what they've done. So I'm going to cheat and say I'd like to go as an unknown for, well, you know what? I'm sorry. That's cheap. I'm going to go.
You know who I think would be good?
What? Who?
Finnick.
Please.
Finnick from Hunger Games.
Finnick. Sam Claflin. Sam Claflin. Yeah, that would be a great choice as well, too. Oh, yeah, that's probably better than my fan little node name. But, you know, I also, but now, the idea of having Mr. Fantastic in itself, which would be, you know, harder to find, I would really like Patrick Wilson, actually.
Okay.
Patrick Wilson would be a nice foil, specifically, I think, for Rosamund Pike. They're around the same age, so I feel like that would be a nice, great dynamic, a bit older. Also, and I think if you want to do Doom, I would love, how do you pronounce his name from Game of Thrones? Nicola Coster-Waldau? Jamie Lannister.
Oh, sorry, Jamie.
I'll say Jamie Lannister. Jamie. Yeah, I'd love Jamie Lannister to play this really this intimidating Doom because we've seen him play this more of a anti-hero. I wanted to just play a bad guy. And I feel like that'd be fantastic to see.
Pun intended.
But. And there's going to be the little audio insert right there. Little sound effect.
Speaking of audio inserts, our next question actually is just for Manning. It's for Mr. Tommy Frazier. Tommy says, the guys seem pretty focused and the podcast flows really well. We are definitely not focused. How long do you spend cleaning up nonsense and making these guys look like superstars?
Well, first off, Tommy, thank you so much for that compliment. At first, when it was first given to me, I was given like a rough cut of, or a rough episode, we shall say, and it was it needed a lot of polishing, we'll say that. But after the first few episodes, when these guys finally got their groove together, I think that the amount of editing really took a down turn about what I needed because they got their groove together, and I needed to take less out, especially in our first phase, when we had to take out a lot of cursing and a lot of just tangents. We had to get that 2-hour mark right there. This one, we have a lot more freedom in what we want to be able to do. And I think that really helps out with what we're trying to aim for, which is a much more free flowing podcast because, you know, we try to remain focused, but I try to rein them in as much as I can, with taking little edits here and there, maybe taking out a pause, taking out some background noise, which is always a necessity because each of you guys, you may not hear it, but there is always a little background noise, but I always take that out when I can, because it sometimes can be distracting just to the ear. It's white noise usually, but it's always a necessity in order to have the kick up the podcast just a bit more. And then finally, of course, most of the editing now just takes kind of like placing here and there. I have a little system now, preset things in Premiere where I just kind of go in and change it there, here and there. And of course, the best part is always trying to find that little Easter egg and putting it in the very adding those. It's so much fun just to add a bit of the humor. I try to take that back when I can, because I don't want to like throw sound effects everywhere, but I want to try to do the best I can to make these guys sound the best and as funny as they can possibly be. Because I will never forget adding the Don't Want to Miss a Thing. When they're like, who's the best Clow? I'm sorry, who's the best Chris? And then Clow was like, well, that's you. Immediately put that in there. Don't want to close my eyes. And it was just so much fun having little moments like that. And then adding, of course, Careless Whisper whenever someone mentions Batman, or excuse me, Mr. Wayne. So that's a fantastic running joke we got going there. But yeah, I won't dwell upon that, but adding stuff like little Monty Python jokes in there, or that's what she said. Those little things are always so much fun to do, and I really enjoy what I get to do.
What's the weirdest thing you can remember cutting out of an episode? What's the story from behind the curtain?
Am I allowed to say whatever?
Yes, you are allowed to. You are allowed to be as honest here as you want.
Let's say that the original Mr. Wayne story went to some really, really dark places that had to do with Kiku's fascination with Batman and his wards, we shall say. I won't go too much into that, but I had to literally bring back the Mario sound effects to bleep that out. And boy, was I having a blast with that. Oh, that was so much fun to get rid of. But when Kiku says, cut that part out, it's when it needs to be cut out. And of course, the Navi sex thing. That Jonathan.
You compromised very well.
I compromised.
You left it in.
I didn't want to get rid of it because you were adamant, and I just left it at a nice little perfect tag. I'm like, yes, all parties are happy. You can't miss it.
Well, guys, we have a very creative. I love that our audio engineer has a personality of his own on the show, even when he's not on the show, which is wonderful. We are nowhere near as funny or as composed as we sound in the finished product. So all credit where credit's due to our editor.
Clow does. Clow
always sounds fairly
fairly put together.
On a similar note, David Herbst has a question for us all. David would like to know, would you rather be the smartest person in the world or the funniest?
Interesting question. I wonder what brought that on.
I'll go ahead and say I would actually rather be neither, because being the smartest person in the world would probably cause some heartache and some unnecessary pressure on you. Because if you knew everything and were smart, maybe not wise, but smart beyond measure, I feel like that would create some tension in what you learn and what people because if you knew everything, that's going to get old really fast. But if you were the funniest person ever, think of how much joy you could bring to the world with just by talking to someone. If you could say, like, hey, Jonathan, how are you doing today? And the person bursted out laughing, I made their day just that much better. Smart, I might know everything, but being the funniest person ever, that would be fantastic. Annoying, maybe, but fantastic.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the inevitable outcome for this question, not to get too dark, but I kind of think that if you're either the smartest or funniest person in the world, that ends with you committing suicide, maybe. I don't know. I mean, there have been some tragic stories about super intelligent people or people who have commanded the passions and humor of the world that have a darker side to them. I mean, if you had to pick one, how could you do the most good in the world? How could you propagate the most valuable ideas in people that you know? Conceivably, it's if you're the smartest person, but it's also not necessarily a sure thing. So, I mean, if you have to force a choice, I guess I'll say smart, only because it seems like there are ways in which you could use your intelligence in order to make people's lives better. But either way, most people who are the most talented at something usually have quite a tortured side to them. So I don't think that either outcome is necessarily going to be good
Agreed.
for the
Agreed.
person blessed with the talent, if that makes sense.
Well, that took a turn.
Yeah, thanks, David.
David, we love you. Let's
Keep up this
transition from
pulse.
there. Manning, happier question for you.
Oh boy.
So dedicated friends of Manning in the social networks will know that there is a certain obsession for Mr. Manning Franks that is
no.
a reason for him to be beloved by all. So
Oh,
Michael
no.
K would like to know, Manning, what was your first exposure to Brie Larson? Was it in her career as an actor or during her short-lived career as a pop star? When did you first fall in love with Brie Larson?
First off, thank you, Michael, for bringing this up. Yes, and those who want to join, you can join our group, Brie Bay Posting, where we post the best pictures of Brie and have the best discussions revolving around Brie Larson, our hero. So anyway, honestly, I didn't know she was a pop star until I think about a year ago. I knew she could sing. I've seen Scott Pilgrim, but I didn't know the extent of her ability. And then realized she sang a song on Radio Disney that I used to listen to, and that was a mind-blowing moment. But honestly, I think it might have been Right on Track. I think it was a Disney Channel original movie, or Hoot, when I first saw her. But I didn't put two and two together until I saw Room, and Room broke me on a level that I have not been broken on in a while, since I probably saw Return of the King in theaters 2003. It was such a raw human drama that I have not seen happen before, and through that I saw Short Term 12 and fell in love with her all over again, because the way she manages to get to this really vulnerable place as an actress that doesn't feel forced or down your throat. It just feels raw and pure and just genuine as an actress. And not many people I can say have done that for me personally. I know some people don't care for her, and that's okay. I don't care for Jennifer Lawrence as an actress, but I find what she tries to do, Jennifer Lawrence, works more for Brie Larson in that sense. About she feels a lot more down-to-earth, girl next door type of thing. And specifically, she's just a great person. If you look at what she's done on social media with sexual assault survivors, just being an overall engaging person with her fans and being very aware of mental illness and fighting for these great causes. She's directing her own movie called The Unicorn Store. That's fantastic. It's this whimsical movie with Samuel L. Jackson in it. I mean, come on, that sounds amazing. She just seems to be this amazing person with a great heart and knows where she comes from. And I'll love what she's done as an actress and as a person. And I can continue to go on about her, but I'm not going to ramble on because I've rambled on long enough. Brie Larson, I love you. End of story.
So Brie Larson, if you are listening to this show, first of all, hello. I want to know how you found the podcast,
Wow.
But also,
Please let us know.
yes, please tweet at Geek Pulse Radio and at @Peyton on Twitter.
Yes, that'd be amazing. Thank you.
On a more serious, but not really serious note, Geeks and Gamers member Tristan Meyer would like to know, in the spirit of McGregor versus Mayweather, which was, as of this recording, last night, which two geek-related characters do you think would make the best face-off match? And who would be the undercard? Chris Clow.
Oh my god, that's extremely difficult. Well, I'm a comic book fan, so the characters that I think of in response to this question are usually comic book characters. I wouldn't mind seeing. Granted, it's a conflict we've seen before loosely, but I wouldn't mind seeing Aquaman versus Namor in a little bit more of a
The Submariner.
because, well, they're both the kings of Atlantis on their respective worlds, and the last time we saw them go at it, at least to my knowledge, it was more as a joke. It was very tongue-in-cheek, and it was very unsatisfying, especially if you're a fan of both of those guys. So they're both immensely powerful. Aquaman isn't given enough credit for how powerful he is. Namor sometimes is given too much. So I wouldn't mind seeing seeing those two guys face off. As far as an undercard is concerned, something a little less complex, and they actually did it in a superpower beatdown, but I don't think it would be that cut and dry. Darth Vader versus Gandalf the Grey. Seems like it would be a pretty interesting matchup. And the Superpower Beatdown episode did a pretty decent job in showing what it might look like, how Gandalf might use the misdirection at his disposal with his magics. But, I mean, Vader's also just raw power. And he's a very difficult person to come back from in a fight. So that seems like that would be pretty cool.
That just sounds like a new epic rap battle.
It does.
What about you, Manning? What are your dream bouts?
Okay, let's be honest. We're kidding ourselves if we don't want to have Darth Vader in there somewhere, being one of the most iconic characters in cinema and in geek culture. But his opponent, none other than Bible Man. I think Bible Man versus Darth Vader, lightsabers in hand, fighting each other for good and evil.
That'd be cut.
That would be so fun and ridiculously stupid. I would pay money to see that.
I forgot.
Homeschooled Manning and I. That is not a deep cut at all.
Homeschooled Manning. Woo!
Well, I mean, the last time I was really aware of Bible Man's existence, God, I was probably like 11. So it's going back a ways for me. So kudos, Manning, thinking outside the box.
Trying to do something different, trying to be crazy, trying to channel my inner Kiku. But the undercard would probably be for me.
I mean, what if you have Bible Man as the title bout? I mean, what go?
I mean, then you got to go Cypher, I'm guessing, or versus. I don't remember anyone else though. What was his name? Like El Fury? No, each character's name was different. Each villain was a different name. Same guy, different name every time. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pull a very deep cut. I really liked Aladdin from Aladdin, which, not very deep cut, but versus Aladdin from Magi. You guys seen Magi before? Labyrinth of Magic? It's an anime.
No.
Those who know, having Aladdin versus Aladdin would be fantastic. Of course, Aladdin before he became, those who are aware, a powerful Magi. So, rather early in his career, but that'd be really interesting. For my deep cut anime fans, you will know who that is.
Manning is just demonstrating that, again, like when Matthew was on here, we should just have him on the show instead of me. He fulfills the same demographic.
No.
He's a lot more attractive. He's a lot more eloquent.
No.
I mean,
your voice is a lot more soothing than mine. Mine's way too high pitched, okay? Yours is perfect.
Aw.
This is just a love fest. Johnny, what about you?
Where is the love?
The first one that came to mind, and this wouldn't work for a death match in a ring, but I want to see some sort of a creation that would put L from Death Note up against Sherlock Holmes. Like two master manipulative detectives going head to head in some sort of a outwitting match would be amazing. For an undercard match that's legitimately just a fight, what would I pick? What would I do? I would really love to see. Oh God, this is requiring me to be creative, and this is where Manning comes in with his awesome editing skills and just like completely removes this entire segment of me trying.
I have no idea what you're talking about. It never happened. What are you talking about?
What do I want? I want to see a
Johnny, I have to say I'm a little surprised considering the giant poster that is on your right to me and your left. I'd have thought he'd have made it in there somewhere.
Yeah, you would think.
I'm trying, but the thing is, when you put Deadpool up against somebody, finding someone that would actually make a good fight against it is difficult because it has to be someone who can match the humor, but it also has to be someone who won't just instantly die. Who would that be? I want to see Deadpool go up against. For some reason, the match that's playing out in my head right now is like the Hobbit era Legolas against Deadpool.
Oh my goodness.
That would be interesting.
That's an interesting pull.
I'm just imagining this in my head. This is how my mind works, guys. I'm just imagining really cocky, annoying Legolas from The Hobbit doing his acrobatics around Deadpool, who's just standing there with his katana blades, just making fun of him the entire time. And that's just all I want to see. Is I just want someone to roast the fuck out of Legolas from The Hobbit. See, this is why I ask the questions and I don't answer the questions. Tristan, hopefully you got enough things for you to play out in your head. I wonder who you think would win these matches.
I know. I gave you Bible Man. That is enough. That is enough.
Bible Man will definitely win that matchup.
Bible Man wins everything. I mean, clearly he's got
apparently
the power behind him.
He does. He
And
does.
what kind of moral would it make for at the end of the episode if he lost? I mean,
You know, well, maybe, hey, you get up, you try again. You know, at first you don't succeed.
Very
That would be the moral. That'd be the
that
moral.
is just cliche enough to work.
You are not wrong, sadly. You are not wrong.
So, Chris, I have a question just for you.
Uh-oh.
For Mr. Thomas Gilkey. Thomas would actually like to know your least favorite Star Trek series
Oh,
and why.
that's an interesting question. Well, the easy answer would be Enterprise, just because that one is probably the most visibly struggling of all of the Star Trek shows, at least in my estimation. But it did such a good job of saving itself in the final season that I actually kind of enjoy it. There's a lot of really interesting foundational things that show explores that as a Star Trek fan I find fascinating. So if I had to pick a least favorite, it's begrudgingly Voyager. And I say begrudgingly largely because Captain Janeway on that show, played by Catherine Mulgrew, she is one of the best Star Trek captains. Like, I have to bow to the greatness of that character. But there are several episodes of that show, particularly around the middle, where it just doesn't feel like they are giving her enough of a challenge to face. I mean, she's faced with a pretty extraordinary challenge at the beginning of the show, just by virtue of the premise of the show, which is that they're lost. They're 70,000 light years from Earth, and they have no chance of hope or backup. They're all alone in a completely unexplored region of space. So she's put in a unique position right from the beginning. But any Star Trek fan who has liked the Borg at all as a terrifying adversary, Voyager did such a great disservice to the Borg by making them a villain of the week for a little too much of a regular stretch, that it kind of symbolizes a lot of the problems that show had overall. So while I love a lot of the characters, and there are several episodes that I legitimately enjoy as some of the best of Star Trek, as a whole show, Voyager is probably the one I like least. But you also have to understand that any Star Trek is still Star Trek. So even if it's not the best Star Trek show, by virtue of its inclusion in the franchise, it's still probably better than a lot of other stuff you could be watching.
Well, there we go. There we have it. Now I know which ones not to watch when I inevitably cave and go through Star Trek to make Chris Clow happy. Christmas time.
Christmas Clow.
I will be here to guide you through the final frontier every step of the way.
See, that sounded vaguely creepy.
Oh, damn it. You had to take it that way. You pushed it in that direction. It is no one's fault. It's yours.
I had to have one Kubiak joke in there somewhere. I mean, come on.
All right, I'll give you that.
All right, from Mr. Joshua Rayner, my colleague over at Merc with the Movie Blog, he asks about our favorite indie movies from the past decade or so. I know Manning mentioned Short Term 12, which is definitely a big pickup there. Any other movies jump out at you, gentlemen, from the last, 10, 15 years.
What are we categorizing, just for clarification, as indie?
What would you like to classify as indie?
I'm assuming low budget film without huge backing. I'm assuming.
Yep, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Avoiding the blockbusters,
So Avengers, obviously Avengers.
Avengers is definitely the right pick. Yep. Also that Star Wars movie that came out a couple years ago.
Such a great indie film. Film.
Yep.
Does The Road count as an indie film?
Yep.
Yeah, I would say so.
That's a mic. That was on a fairly low budget.
Yeah,
it was
like under $30 million at least, but I'm not sure exactly. I mean, if The Road counts.
Also, it's just not appreciated enough, so you should tell people why they should watch The Road.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, as a post-apocalyptic story, The Road is fascinating because it never really tells you what the catalyzing event was for the state of post-apocalypse, but it focuses specifically on just a dangerous world and the characters trying to live in it. And I love The Road to death. If I had to pick some other ones, I was a really big fan of The Founder. I thought that Michael Keaton did a spectacular job as Ray Kroc, and it was a movie that told a story that could have been interpreted by a lot of different kinds of people in different ways. It was very even-handed in the way that it presented that story to you, where I feel like if you are predisposed to hating the corporate machine, you'll think that he's an evil scumbag. But if you are also classify yourself as like a believer in free market capitalism, then you might not think that what he did was all that bad. The movie lets you make up your own mind, and I really appreciate it because of that. Other one, so that's two, right? So one more. Oh, documentary 2007, The King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters. I loved that movie so much. It was about the world record for the original Donkey Kong game and the war that broke out between two players, one of whom is really well known in the retro gaming scene, and the other who is a guy from Washington State who worked as a public school teacher and just kind of came out of nowhere as an underdog in a scene that is very weirdly judgmental about the kinds of people who play in it, which is interesting, but a very well done indie documentary that I love. And just as a bonus, a fourth one that I'll throw in there is Diary of the Dead by George A. Romero, which is one of the last independently produced zombie movies that he made. I think that one is really highly underappreciated, and character work is almost reaches the kind of level that it did when he made the original Night of the Living Dead in the 60s. So I'll say that one.
Very nice. Very nice.
Avengers aside, it pains me to take that off of here, but I'm looking into it now. I'm pretty sure Your Name considered an indie, or is it?
It is a smaller studio in Japan, so I think that we could probably count that.
Because it's not Studio Ghibli, so I'm like, it must be a smaller independent studio. Looking at what they've done,
we'll even throw the label of indie out and just say, lesser known, smaller budget films that
okay. I want to just praise Your Name. There hasn't been a film. Wait a minute. Since Room, this was, I guess, well, you know what? I cry a lot in films. I'm a very emotional man. But Your Name brought me to tears in a way that few movies have done. I was just bawling. The third act, I was gone. There was such a pure innocence to this film that you won't see in many American films, but there was something in this Eastern film that managed to capture something about love across dimensions and across time that really, I don't know, I wouldn't say spoke to me, but definitely had me at its grasp in a way that I just felt all warm inside, all fuzzy. I believed in love again. I believed in life. It just makes you feel so good after watching Your Name. I want to watch it again now that I'm thinking about it. But overall, I think this is a movie people flew under the radar. Well, in America at least, overseas, especially in Japan, it killed at the box office. Absolutely killed. Here, not so much, but specifically in Japan, it killed, and I feel like it needs to be seen by a lot of people because while it may not be life-changing, anime, well, in a way, it has a way to just suck your soul because it wants to you to keep going and going and watching because the emotion is usually like at a 10 in comparison to most Western movies and TV shows and such. But Your Name managed to capture that brilliantly. And also, I also just kind of want to shout out Short Term 12 once again because it's just so good. It's a movie that's also very pure and very genuine in the way it portrays certain events and certain situations people are in. Brie Larson once again excels fantastically, and Destin Daniel Cretton is another amazing director, and I think this is a movie people need to see. It's currently still on Netflix. I recommend people still go see it. It's so good. And for the third one, the third one is this is the part where I cut stuff out. This is the part where I cut stuff out. Give me a second. Da, 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 da.
Can you hear my cat? While we're in the part,
yes, I can hear the cat, so the cat will be cut. The cat will be cut. I almost forgot this. Eye in the Sky. Eye in the Sky is a movie that people just forgot about completely, and I saw it on Redbox, and I'm so glad I saw Eye in the Sky at Redbox because it is a movie that really makes you question your stances on a lot of things. Because I'm watching it with my family, and we had a great debate and a great talk following the film. And not many films you can say have done that after you see one. Like after you see Star Wars, wow, that's super awesome. I wonder who Rey's parents are. After you see Eye in the Sky, you're questioning, so wait, what is right and what is wrong? When does the end justify the means? And that I feel like Eye in the Sky did perfectly and redeemed. Gavin Hood did it, correct?
Yes.
It redeemed X-Men Origins Wolverine. Sort of. You're on the right track, Gavin. Specifically for that one, and I loved Eye in the Sky. See it.
And for context, listeners, Eye in the Sky talks about like drone warfare.
Yes, excuse me.
And it's a really, really tense, like horrifying watch, and it's amazing. My picks took a second for me to think about which ones I would want to recommend right away. The first one is a movie that I try to get everyone that likes movies that make you think to watch. There was a movie that came out about a decade ago called Thank You for Smoking, directed by Jason Reitman. One of the most compelling, thought-provoking comedies I've ever seen. It's brilliantly directed, it's brilliantly scripted, and it has one of the most likable, unlikable protagonists I've seen in a comedy. And the way that it messes with the way that you perceive situations and the way it forces you to almost side against yourself sometimes, while still keeping you laughing the entire time is absolutely brilliant. Everyone needs to see Thank You for Smoking. It's one of the best comedies I would say since 2000. To be utterly honest. Next one is a little bit of a cheat, a small budget. It's my favorite Woody Allen film. It's called Midnight in Paris. The budget.
Yes. Yes.
If you're a fan of classic literature, if you're a fan of even just pretentious films in general that have lots of inside jokes for people who love Hemingway, watch Midnight in Paris. A man is trapped in a street in Paris that sends him back in time to the early 1900s, where he's able to meet F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway and Salvador Dali and all of these just titans in art. And interact with them, and maybe learn that they are not as perfect as one would think looking back. And my third pick, which is one that I've actually talked about on the show a couple times, I think me and Chris Clow have gone back and forth about a couple times too as well. Red State. Kevin Smith's one of his most out of the box flicks, and definitely my favorite of his filmography. It's a very tense film, and it's a very boundary-pushing film that tackles some really deep concepts of religion and extremism and what it means to believe something, honestly, in a really fascinating way. It's got one of the best acted scenes that I can remember, like one of the most unforgettable scenes in a movie by a single actor, almost a Shakespearean dramatic monologue about halfway through it that just sends shivers down my spine every time I even think about it. So between those three films, those are probably three of the indie films from the last 15 years that I would recommend the most. So, good question.
Yeah, definitely.
So for our final question, also from Mr. David Herbst, this one caught my eye, and I wanted to get your guys' answer to this one. It's a very open-ended question, so there might be some pauses to cut out on this one, but David would like to know, what are you most passionate about?
Oh, goodness.
Again, thanks, David. You're bringing out the serious questions, even if you didn't mean to.
You know, I think that's, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but I think that's a question that has a shifting answer depending on where a person is at in their life, what they're aiming to do, and how they are planning to shape themselves in the immediate future. I mean, for me, that answer has changed more times than I can count because of curveballs that life has thrown at me, or opportunities that have arisen from jobs that I've had, or things that I've wanted to pursue myself. I've also, I got married recently, so that certainly has an impact on the answer to that question. I think part of being human is that there is no singular answer to that question. I mean, if you are aware of who you are as a person, what your capabilities and limitations are, and where you want to position yourself for the future, then it isn't necessarily just one thing that drives you, that you're passionate about. It's going to be a multitude of different things. So, I mean, I'm passionate about keeping my marriage as alive as it is now in 50 years, if I live that long, knock on wood. I'm passionate about making myself hireable in a number of different capacities. If I want to try and devote myself to a new trade, then I have to go about that in a smart way. I'm passionate about sharing ideas with people in a way that is meaningful for both them and for me. And the source of those passions are they rarely come from a single source. I think that you have to ask yourself that, especially when you're endeavoring to do something that you haven't done before. And if you are asking yourself what you really want to accomplish based on a task that is set before you. So it's a good question that's not meant to be a dodge. And if it comes off that way, then I apologize. But it's such an open-ended and multifaceted question that I think there's a lot of different ways that a person can take that. And a person might interpret that question differently too, which might bring about different answers. So basically, I guess it's open-ended. I'll just leave it at that.
For myself, I don't think that was a cop-out answer at all, Cloud. That was a very true and honest answer, because it's you're right. When the older we get, we're not the same person that we were when we, 5 years ago. We have different goals. We have different paths that we're taking. Hopefully the people that we're with sometimes will be with us on this journey as well too. But that changes. Like, I know specifically when I went to college, which I'm currently in now, just for reference, senior year, and that's kind of a daunting task because I'm thinking about my life and what's it going to be. What do I enjoy doing? What do I love? What do I love to do? Who do I love to do it with? Who do I feel like I'm getting the most out of my life and I'm making the biggest impact on? What do I like to eat in the morning? What do I want to do? When do I want to go to bed? It's questions like these you ask yourself every second of every day, because passion is something where you have a strong held belief toward a specific thing, or a strong connection towards something. And I know specifically for me, I'm doing it right. Well, I will be doing it in about a couple of hours. Well, when you're reading this, it's already been done. When you're listening to this, it's already been done. editing. I love being able to look at work that you've done, film something, record something, play it back, and then see the fruits of your labor. And that is one of the most satisfying feelings you can ever get. Seeing it actually turn good, and people say, "Hey, you know what? You got moxie, kid. I like what you got there. You know, it's pretty good." And I enjoy, you know, people validating what you've created is always a fantastic feeling. But it's always the best when people you know start validating what you've done. You know that you're on the right track. You're passionate about what you do. And those passions might change in 5 years. I know I was in theater. I thought I was going to be an actor I was in like middle school or high school. I think it was. No, high school. I was going to be an actor. That didn't pan out as well as I thought it would. And maybe by the time that I'm 30, my passion might change. Still probably film because something I've loved since I was a kid. Our hobbies probably won't change, but what we devote our time to probably will. But my journey is still going, and I'm just waiting to see what'll happen, God willing. So there you go.
So perhaps it could be said we are most passionate about finding new things worthy of being passionate about.
Yes. Right now, I like editing. We'll say that. I love editing. That's the simple answer.
Which is why you are our audio engineer, which is a perfect way for us to end this show.
Post-production for the win!
This has been so much fun having Manning on this side of the production end. Next week, I promise you, Kubiak will be back. We will have his awesome manic energy and craziness and constant jokes that make Chris Clow go, "Oh, no, no."
You're scraping the bottom of the barrel again.
Hey, I will defend that he was scraping the bottom.
No! I listened to it back. He was scraping. He was taking that low-hanging fruit and just grabbing it. And that was not meant to be a euphemism.
Insert any of a bevy of comments that Chris Kubiak would be saying right now. Just think about it in your head and imagine we're saying them here.
Or better yet, and right there, you just got it. You just listen to Clow, right? You just listen to Kiku right there. Boom.
This is the only episode. These last 2 episodes, the only ones that I could send to my mother and say, "You should listen to my show."
There you go.
Ladies, gentlemen, it's been so much fun hanging out with you. Chris Clow, any closing thoughts for the week? Anything to leave our listeners with? Shout outs, thoughts, advice, recommendations, food preferences,
I'm rereading one of my favorite Batman comic book runs in history, which is written by a guy named Grant Morrison, who's probably my favorite creative mind in comics. He's done so much with so many different characters across so many different publishers. His Batman run is often overlooked. It went from 2006 to about 2012, 2013, and really crazy, unique stories that piss people off because they said Batman shouldn't go there. But it also had the virtue of being one of the most unique eras in Batman's comic book history. Check out Batman and Son, the Deluxe Edition, and you can see what I mean. Other than that, always ask yourself what you're passionate about, and maybe it'll lead you to an interesting realization. You never know, but that's always something that should be at the front of your mind.
Mr. Manning Franks, how about you?
Thoughts I want to leave you guys is that dreams do come true. You can be invited on the podcast you edit. It is true. You can get that. You can get that glass slipper. It'll fit. It will fit. You don't have to cut off your heel or whatever. It'll fit. But no, in all honesty, I just want to say thank you guys for having me again. It's great to be on this side of the podcast. I'll have to come back later when someone else is sick. Muhahaha. But yeah, I've enjoyed it. Hope you guys have a great week. And just for everyone listening to this, do what you're passionate about. Legally, of course, but do what you're passionate about, because there's nothing that feels better than doing what you love, and then, seeing the fruits of that labor, as I mentioned prior. It's a great feeling, and I think that's something that we could all do.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that has been episode 14.2 of Geek Pulse Radio with myself, Chris Clow, and Manning Franks. Please tweet at us at Geek Pulse Radio with any of your questions or thoughts throughout the week, or join the Geeks and Gamers discussion group and hang out with us in person over the interwebs. So not in person, but also in person, kind of in person. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend. We will be recording over Labor Day weekend, so we will be definitely enjoying it. Manning will be back in the editor's chair. Chris Kubiak will be back in the hosting chair next time. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
And stop.
Go see your name, everybody.
Also,
on Kiss and Win. Yes. Oh, Wind Waker's so good.